The sixth edition of Talkin Tar Heels starts right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Talkin Tar Heels. Today, we've got a very special episode planned because I am welcoming my first guest to the show. He has been a huge influence to me in my transition into starting a YouTube channel, my motivation. He currently is the host of the Four Corners podcast and currently runs the board at WFNZ. He is my older brother, Josh Marlow. Josh, hello, and how are you doing today?
It's good to be with you, little bro. Thanks for the kind words. Just know that whatever success that you enjoy in your media career, I am taking every bit of the credit for it. So, but excited to be here and talk some Carolina basketball as the off season continues for Heber Davis, his staff, and this roster.
All right, well, let's jump straight into this, and today's episode is we're gonna be discussing ceiling and floor like we did for the football team, just on the basketball side of things. But first, let's go into an off-season recap. Carolina lost some key pieces in Armando Bacot and Cormac Ryan to graduation. However, they add two five-star guards in Drake Powell and Ian Jackson in the freshman class. They also brought in a very highly touted transfer class and Vin Allen Lubin, a 6'8 Vanderbilt forward, and then Cade Tyson, Belmont guard. What did you think of the offseason that Hubert Davis put together?
Well, you didn't mention maybe the biggest departure, that being Harrison Ingram, who left to go to the NBA draft and second round pick of the time. The guy that really opened everything up last year and was as big a reason why Carolina had the success that they had. 29 wins, ACC regular season title, a one seed in the tournament, making the second weekend. And as much as there was focus on replacing Armando Bacot's lost production, they had to find a way to replace Harrison Ingram. And they didn't necessarily achieve what they wanted to in both of those departments. Carolina swung and missed on a lot of big men in the portal. Jonas Adu, Omar Ballo, Clifford Amori. You get Ben Allen Lubin, the Vanderbilt transfer, a guy that as an offensive rebounder is as elite as you were going to find in the portal. And then you add Cade Tyson. You get the second best three-point shooter in the portal in your program. And Carolina has to shoot the three ball better if they want to play deeper into March. You look at the two freshmen that Carolina brought in. Ian Jackson's a one-and-done player. His body is ready to go to the NBA. Drake Powell, I think, could be the guy that ends up replacing that lost production of Harrison Ingram. Just a guy that competes. He's tough. He's gritty. Does all the little things and does them really well. So, the thing I talked about all off season, once R.J. Davis announced his decision to return, using that COVID year to come back to Chapel Hill for a fifth year, was putting together a roster that could win a national championship. I don't think Carolina will open the season as a favorite. I think they'll be a preseason top 10 team. But this is a roster that if guys take that next step, you get internal growth from Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, Jalen Washington, and you get production from the transfers and the freshmen. This is a team that I think when we are sitting there on Selection Sunday, we get our bracket, you can fill out them being in the Final Four and feel pretty comfortable about it.
One thing that I really liked about the way Hubert Davis built this roster is just the amount of three-point shooters that Carolina gets. I watched a camp game and Ian Jackson was making it rain out there. Obviously, you mentioned Cade Tyson. Carolina's going to have a lot more options from three. They may not shoot necessarily better, but it's just going to be able to allow Carolina to run a more wide open offense to where you can have four or five guys on the floor that can shoot the three ball. And I really like that. I was wondering your thoughts on that as well. What do you think of the style of play? How much do you think it'll change, and how much do you think it'll benefit Carolina to change their style of play?
Well, I mean, look, there's no denying that there's got to be more perimeter shooting on this one. R.J. Davis is a great player, but he's not and this isn't a knock on RJ. This is for every person in his situation. He's not great enough to shoot Carolina to the Final Four. He needs help. He had help when they went to the Final Four in 22. You had Brady Manick. You had Caleb Love making those timely threes. Sean didn't have that last year. Cormac Ryan just never found a rhythm. Shot in the high 20s and low 30 percentile from behind the 3-point line for the majority of the season. Harrison Ingram was the swing guy, shooting around 38%, but it wasn't on a high volume. And so defenses in the tournament really clamped down on R.J. Davis on the perimeter because there was no one else that was there to kill the defense. And so that's why you go bring in you go and you bring in a K. Tyson, a guy that shot 40%, 46% from behind the 3-point line on a high volume of shots. Elliot Cadeau, the biggest thing he has to work on this year is becoming a reliable 3-point shooter. I think Steph Trimble can shoot the 3-ball really, really well. You got to do it on a high volume. Something Dave Dillis talked about as the season moved along. He's got to shoot the ball more. He's got to be more of a scoring threat. You bring in Ian Jackson, a kid that's not going to be afraid to put up shots. So Carolina, you've got R.J. Davis, one of the best perimeter shooters in the history of the program, one of the best perimeter shooters in the country coming back, but you had to add more around him, and you did that with the additions of Ian Jackson, with Kate Tyson. You get internal growth from the guys on your roster that came back for their sophomore or their junior season. Carolina is poised to be a better three-point shooting team this season, which I think lends them to playing deeper into March.
And let's move into how high we think this team can go. I personally believe that the ceiling for this team is a number 1 seed and making the Final Four. They've got the talent, the experience, the leadership to be serious national title contenders. There is several things that I feel have to fall into place. Jalen Washington needs to become an interior presence. The freshmen have got to prove that they're big game ready, and the defense needs to be solid. And I have a couple reasons why this can and will happen. Jalen Washington's length already makes him hard to shoot over. So if he can develop that interior post defense game over the offseason, I feel like he can become that interior presence that Carolina needs. And there's just way too much talent in this freshman class for them to not be big performers. And I think that's why Hubert Davis signed these guys on. So I'm curious to see what you think the ceiling is. You mentioned being confident that this team can make the Final Four earlier. So what do you feel like the ceiling is for this team?
I mean, the ceiling's the national championship because you got the best guard in the country coming back. You've got a coach that has proven he knows what he's doing. The big games don't scare him. Just look at all the big games he's won in just his 3 years on the sideline at Carolina. You've got experience in the backcourt. You've got you've got maybe inexperience in the front court, but there's talent there. I think you're a little bit more athletic. You're a little bit more deeper, top to bottom. So that's the ceiling. But that's usually the ceiling every year for Carolina basketball. There are, especially now in the transfer portal era, there aren't many years where you look at the roster and you don't think if this thing comes together, they can't win a national championship. That's what Hubert Davis did. He put together a roster that if you get what you expect to get from your guys that are returning, and you get more from some guys that are going to have elevated roles this year, then Carolina is more than capable of winning a national championship. I think what's key to remember is I don't think that should be your preseason expectation. I want it to be because I want R.J. Davis to win a national championship as much as any player I've ever watched play at Carolina, but I don't expect them to win the national title. Not with what Kansas did in the portal, not with what Houston has done as a program. Duke is as gifted and as talented as they've ever been. It's hard for me to expect them to win a national championship. but they're more than capable of doing so, and that's the most important thing.
All right, so now let's transition to the floor for this team because I believe that there's a scenario where this team struggles just because of lack of interior size and presence. And I believe that the floor for this team could be as low as an 8 seed and a round of 64, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on this as well. So, what do you believe that the floor is for this team?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's around the 32 team. I think worst case scenario, they're a 6 seed in the tournament. They get a bad draw in that 3-6 second round matchup, and they go home. I don't see that happening. I do think the way that it happens is A, they don't shoot the ball any better than they did on the perimeter outside of R.J. Davis, and B, you don't you don't get what you need up front from Jalen Washington, Ben Allen Lubin, and what other people in the front court are there to take over for Armando, Harrison Ingram, Cormac Ryan, and others. So, but I mean, I think that's absolute worst case scenario. They play a tough schedule in November and December. There's going to be some bumps on the road. There's going to be some early losses in the non-conference season, but look at the way it paid off for them last year and what they did in the ACC, running through that league rather easily. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this team handles adversity. I thought last year's team was so mentally tough that no matter what happened, they were always able to bounce back and got some big wins on the road in big-time environments at NC State, ending the drought at Virginia, winning at Duke on senior night for a second time under Hubert Davis. So, if Case Tyson doesn't transition to the Power 5 level well, if Jalen Washington doesn't take that next step that he needs to take as a big man, I could definitely see this team not reaching some of those other goals and being a tournament team, but being one that has a rather quick exit from the NCAA tournament.
All right, so thank you for that answer. Now let's go to the main key for success to avoid that floor that we just talked about. Because I feel like the main key for success for this team is going to be on the defensive glass, just because of what we've talked about before. They're losing a lot of rebounding production from Harrison Ingram and Armando Bacot. So I believe that the key is on the defensive glass. I think if Carolina is going to avoid an early exit in the NCAA tournament, they've got to be a good rebounding team. And I just don't see it with this roster. But then again, they could surprise me. So what do you feel like the main key for success is for this team to avoid that floor that we just talked about?
It's perimeter shooting. Carolina has to replace rebounders. Yes, Armando, the most decorated rebounder in the history of the program. Harrison Ingram, a guy that led the ACC in rebounding a year ago. Carolina shouldn't have been as good of a rebounding team as they were last year. And the first 2 months of the season, they weren't a good rebounding team. Saw them in person against Oklahoma at the Jumpman Invitational, a game they won against a top 10 team at the time. They got out rebounded. I think they got out rebounded by 7. They then morphed into the best rebounding team in the ACC and a top 10 rebounding team in the country. The blend of Hubert Davis having played for Coach Smith and been mentored by Coach Williams, he values rebounding. It is arguably the most important aspect of the game, right up there with shooting. You can not be a great shooting team, but be a great rebounding team and win championships. So I don't worry myself about Carolina not being able to rebound because it's in this program's DNA. And starting with Coach Smith, on to Coach Williams, now to Coach Davis. So for me, it's perimeter shooting. RJ is going to shoot a high percentage on a high volume of shots. You need other guys that can put the ball in the basket. You need Case Tyson to shoot the ball at the Power 5 level the way he had at the Group of 5 level. You need Elliot Cadeau to become a legitimate threat from the outside, a guy that can shoot 36, 37, 38%. Jeff Trimble, another guy that can shoot the ball consistently from the outside, along with Ian Jackson and maybe Drake Powell. If Carolina surrounds R.J. Davis with adequate help on the perimeter, this offense will become more efficient. They'll become harder to guard, and I think it really positions themselves to become a team that can win a national championship. Because the truth be told, last year Carolina didn't have the firepower you needed to have to be able to win a national title. This was a team that really was more comfortable playing in the low 70s as opposed to the upper 80s. I think this team is built to play in the upper 80s if they shoot the ball the way that these guys have shot it throughout the majority of their career at different stops. So for me, it really comes down to their ability to shoot the ball from the outside. If they can shoot 36, 37, 38% as a team, I think Carolina will be a team that will put themselves in the national title race as the season moves along.
All right, well, guys, that is a wrap for this show. I'd like to give a huge thanks to Josh Marlow, my older brother, for joining us. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming content. And I will see you guys next Saturday.